All right, so we're diving into Chapter 4 of Four Noble Truths.
Okay.
By Rerukane Chandawimala Mahathero.
All right.
Translated by DJ Percy Silva.
Sounds good.
You want to go from page 155 onward, and we're focusing on the path to the cessation of suffering.
That's it.
So that's our deep dive today.
Wonderful.
And what I find fascinating is that this book really uses a lot of examples of beings from different realms
Absolutely.
to kind of illustrate how universal suffering is.
It does.
So before we even get to the path itself, I'm kind of curious, what does the book say about the nature of suffering in these different realms? Like, is it all just, fire and brimstone and hell and rainbows and butterflies and diva realm?
Well, it's interesting because the book does describe the hells as realms of intense torment, but I think it's important to remember that suffering isn't just about physical pain.
Okay.
And even the devas who experience incredible pleasure and beauty, they suffer too.
Really? Why would they suffer if they're living in this blissful heavenly realm?
Well, because even their happiness is impermanent.
Okay.
They know that their lifespans, they're incredibly long, are finite.
Right.
Imagine living in paradise, but with this constant awareness that it will inevitably end.
Oh, wow.
That knowledge casts a shadow over their entire existence.
Okay.
Creating this subtle but pervasive anxiety.
That's interesting because it's almost like, the fear of losing something precious can also be a form of suffering.
Exactly.
Like even while you're experiencing the joy of having it.
Absolutely. And that fear of loss, that clinging to pleasurable experiences is ultimately rooted in craving.
Okay.
And the book identifies craving as the engine that drives the cycle of suffering across all realms, not just the human realm.
So craving isn't just about wanting material things or, sensory pleasures.
No, it goes much deeper than that.
Okay.
It's a fundamental thirst for existence.
Right.
A clinging to the five aggregates: corporeality, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness.
Yeah.
That we mistakenly believe to be our true selves.
Okay, hold on. I think we got to unpack these five aggregates a bit for the listener because that sounds pretty abstract.
Yeah.
Can you give me some concrete examples of how craving manifests in each of these areas?
Absolutely. So let's start with corporeality.
Okay.
Think about how much energy we put into controlling our physical bodies.
Right.
Dieting, exercising, obsessing over our appearance.
Yep.
It stems from a craving to maintain a certain image.
Sure.
A fear of aging and decay.
It's like we forget that our bodies are constantly changing.
No matter
what we do.
Exactly.
Try to hold on to, some form.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to feelings, craving attaches to pleasant experiences and recoils from unpleasant ones.
Yeah.
Think about those cravings you get for certain foods, or that urge to scroll through social media for a quick hit of dopamine.
Right.
We chase after these fleeting pleasures.
Yeah.
But the satisfaction ever lasts.
It's like that saying, pleasure is like drinking salt water.
Yes.
It only makes you thirstier.
Exactly. Now, with perception, craving distorts how we see the world.
Okay.
We tend to focus on what we want to see, what confirms our desires, and ignore or downplay anything that contradicts our preferred narrative.
So it's like craving builds its own little echo chamber in our minds.
Yes, and it can be incredibly convincing.
Wow.
Now, mental formations are where things get really interesting.
Okay.
These are the thoughts, ideas, and beliefs that arise in the mind.
Right.
And craving shapes them in subtle ways.
Oh, okay.
We cling to ideas that justify our desires, even if they're irrational or harmful, and we reject ideas that challenge our comfort zone.
So craving doesn't just influence what we want.
Right.
It also influences how we think about those wants.
It does.
Yeah, that's really powerful.
It is. And lastly, we have consciousness.
Okay.
Craving fuels the illusion of a separate self.
Right.
We identify with our thoughts, feelings, and experiences, believing them to be who we truly are.
Yeah.
This creates a deep sense of isolation and a constant fear of losing this constructed self.
So it's not just about craving things, but about craving a certain idea of ourselves.
Exactly.
A self that we're desperately trying to hold on to.
Precisely. And the book argues that this clinging to the five aggregates, this fundamental misunderstanding of who we are, is the root cause of suffering, no matter which realm we inhabit.
Okay, so this is all fascinating, but it's starting to make me wonder, if suffering is so deeply rooted in our very being, is there even a way out?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And this is where the book really shines. Remember, we're focusing on pages 155 onward, the section on the path to the cessation of suffering, also known as the Fourth Noble Truth.
Right, the path. So what does this book offer as the way out of this, tangled web of craving and suffering?
Well, The book presents the Noble Eightfold Path as the antidote.
Okay.
It's not just a list of rules, but a framework for transforming our relationship with ourselves and the world.
Right.
Ultimately leading to liberation.
So it's more about understanding than just blind obedience.
Exactly. And it all starts with right view.
Okay.
Seeing reality as it is free from the distortions of craving.
But if craving is like, so deeply ingrained in us, how do we even begin to cultivate right view? It sounds like a pretty tall order.
It's definitely a journey, not a quick fix.
Right.
The book emphasizes that right view involves dismantling 3 specific wrong views.
Okay.
Taking the 5 aggregates as I, believing they are permanent,
right,
and seeing them as sources of pleasure.
So we're talking about challenging those fundamental misconceptions about ourselves and the world that we were just talking about.
Precisely, these wrong views create a vicious cycle.
Okay.
When we cling to the aggregates as I, we invest them with a false sense of solidity and permanence.
Right.
We believe that we are these ever-changing collections of matter, feelings, perceptions, and thoughts.
And that's what leads to suffering, because if we identify with those things, then their inevitable decline and disintegration feels like a personal tragedy.
Exactly. And then there's the misconception of permanence.
Right.
We crave things to last for our youth, our relationships, our happiness.
Yeah.
But clinging to that idea only sets us up for disappointment.
Of course.
Change is the very nature of existence.
It's like trying to hold on to water.
Yes.
The tighter you grip it, the more it slips away.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Finally, there's the mistaken belief that the 5 aggregates are sources of true happiness.
Right.
We chase after pleasurable sensations thinking they'll finally fulfill us.
Yeah.
But that pursuit is ultimately empty.
Mm-hmm.
Pleasure is fleeting and conditional. It arises and passes away, never truly satisfying that deep yearning for lasting happiness.
So cultivating right view involves a pretty radical shift in perspective.
It does.
Recognizing the impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and impersonal nature of the things that we cling to.
Yes, but it's not about becoming pessimistic or denying the joys of life.
Okay.
It's about seeing things as they truly are,
right,
which allows us to relate to them in a healthier, more liberating way.
This has started to click for me, but how do we actually make this shift? It can't just be about thinking our way out of craving, can it?
You're right. It's not just about intellectual understanding.
Okay.
The book emphasizes the importance of insight meditation, directly experiencing these truths through mindful observation.
So we're not just thinking about these concepts,
right,
but we're actually feeling them in our own experience.
Exactly. By paying close attention to our own physical sensations, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and even consciousness itself,
right,
we can start to see that they are constantly arising and passing away,
okay,
that they are not a solid me or mine.
So we're becoming the observer of our experience rather than getting caught up in the drama of it all.
Precisely. And as we develop this mindful awareness, the book explains that right view naturally leads to right thought.
So we're not just seeing things differently, but we're actually starting to think differently as well.
Yes, right thought involves cultivating wholesome intentions and letting go of harmful ones.
Okay.
It's about becoming aware of those habitual negative thought patterns that fuel craving, the jealousy, greed, anger, delusion, and choosing to cultivate their opposites. Loving kindness, compassion, generosity, and wisdom.
So it's like we're weeding out the mental habits that keep us stuck in the cycle of suffering.
Right.
And planting the seeds of what will actually nourish us.
That's a great way to put it. And as our thinking shifts, it naturally influences our speech and actions.
Okay, so we're moving from right thought to right speech and right action.
Exactly. Right speech is about speaking truthfully, kindly, and in a way that promotes harmony and understanding.
Okay.
It involves recognizing the power of language to either connect or divide.
Right.
We become mindful of how our words impact others and choose to speak in a way that uplifts and inspires rather than creating conflict or spreading negativity.
So it's about using our words to create a more positive and harmonious environment, both for ourselves and those around us.
Precisely. And right action naturally flows from that.
Okay.
It involves behaving in ways that are ethical, skillful, and beneficial to ourselves and others.
Right.
This means refraining from actions that cause harm, like stealing, lying, or engaging in violence, and cultivating actions that promote well-being, like generosity, kindness, and compassion.
So it's about putting those right thoughts and right words into practice in our daily lives.
Exactly. And right action extends to our livelihood as well.
Okay, so right livelihood, what does that entail?
It's about engaging in work that is ethically sound and doesn't contribute to the suffering of ourselves or others.
So choosing a profession that aligns with our values.
Yes.
And contributes to the well-being of the world.
Exactly.
Yeah, and this can be tricky to navigate in our modern world where so many industries are built on, exploitation or harm in some way.
You're right, it's not always easy. But the book emphasizes that right livelihood is a crucial aspect of the path, especially for those seeking true liberation.
Okay, so we've covered the first 5 factors: right view, right thought, right speech, right action, and right livelihood.
Yes.
That's a lot to take in.
It is.
What comes next on this path?
Now we delve into the more internal meditative aspects of the path, beginning with right effort.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. What exactly does right effort entail?
Right effort is about skillfully directing our energy and attention.
Okay.
It's about intentionally cultivating wholesome qualities and letting go of unwholesome ones.
So it's like we're becoming the gardeners of our own minds.
Yes.
Consciously weeding out the negative and nurturing the positive.
Right. Effort has 4 components.
Okay.
Preventing unwholesome states from arising.
Right.
Abandoning those that have already arisen.
Okay.
Cultivating wholesome states and maintaining those that have been developed.
So it's not just about passively observing our thoughts and emotions,
right,
but it's about actively shaping them.
Exactly. And this active engagement prepares the ground for right mindfulness.
Okay, mindfulness, that's a buzzword these days.
It is.
Everyone seems to be talking about it. But what does right mindfulness actually mean in the context of the Eightfold Path?
Right. Mindfulness in the Buddhist sense is much more than just a relaxation technique.
Okay.
It's about paying attention to the present moment with clarity and non-judgmental awareness.
Right.
It's about noticing the arising and passing away of all phenomena, our thoughts, feelings, sensations, perceptions, without getting swept away by them.
So it's about becoming the observer of our experience rather than getting lost in the drama of it all.
Exactly, right? Mindfulness allows us to see things as they truly are, impermanent and ever-changing,
right,
which helps loosen the grip of craving.
Because when we see that everything is impermanent, we become less attached, less afraid of loss, and less driven by that need to control.
Precisely, and this ability to observe with clarity naturally leads to the final factor of the path, right? Concentration.
Okay, so right. Concentration, is this where like those images of monks meditating in serene settings come in?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
While meditation is certainly a key tool for cultivating right concentration, it's important to understand that it's not just about withdrawing from the world.
Right.
It's about developing a mind that is calm, focused, and resilient even amidst the challenges of daily life.
So it's about bringing that meditative awareness into all aspects of our lives, not just when we're sitting on a cushion with our eyes closed.
Exactly. Now, the book emphasizes that simply knowing the Eightfold Path intellectually isn't enough.
Right.
It's about embodying these principles, right view, right thought, right speech, all the way to right concentration in our thoughts, words, actions, and overall way of being in the world.
So it's a process of like ongoing cultivation and refinement. It's not like you flip a switch and suddenly you're enlightened.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Right.
And each step along the path brings us closer to liberation from suffering.
This is all incredibly insightful. The book mentions the Noble Eightfold Path being divided into categories. Could you shed some light on that?
Of course, the path is often described in terms of 3 main categories: wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline.
Okay, so it's like a 3-pronged approach to transformation.
Decisely, wisdom, which includes right view and right thought, is about seeing things as they truly are, free from delusion.
Okay.
Ethical conduct, comprising right speech, right action, and right livelihood, is about living in a way that's skillful, harmonious, and beneficial.
Right.
And mental discipline, which encompasses right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, is about training the mind to be calm, focused, and present.
It's fascinating how those 3 categories work together. Like you can't really have ethical conduct without wisdom.
Right.
And mental discipline supports both of those.
That's a key insight. The 3 categories are interconnected and support each other.
Yeah.
They're not separate paths, but aspects of a unified approach to liberation.
So it's a holistic path that addresses every aspect of our being.
Yes, a beautiful way to put it. Now, the book also makes a distinction between how these 8 factors manifest in the lives of ordinary people called worldlings and those who have attained higher levels of spiritual development.
Okay, so we're talking about the difference between how the Eightfold Path shows up in the mundane world versus like the supermundane.
Exactly. The book explains that in the lives of ordinary people, the 8 factors may arise sporadically, but they don't have the power to completely eradicate suffering.
Okay.
However, when these factors are developed and cultivated systematically, they can lead to profound spiritual awakening.
So there are different levels of engagement with the path, depending on where we are in our spiritual development.
Yes, the book explains that when all 8 factors of the path come together in a powerful and transformative way, it leads to the attainment of the supermundane path.
Okay.
This marks a significant shift in consciousness,
Right.
one that ultimately leads to the complete cessation of suffering.
So the Eightfold Path isn't just a set of, abstract principles.
Right.
But it's a path that can actually lead to a radical transformation in our experience of reality.
That's the core message the book emphasizes, that the path to liberation is available to anyone who's willing to put in the effort.
Wow, this deep dive is really starting to clarify how this path unfolds from the initial understanding of the truth of suffering
Yes.
to the cultivation of right view and the embodiment of all 8 factors.
Right.
But what happens when someone actually reaches the end of this path? What does liberation actually look like?
That's the big question, isn't it? What happens when we actually reach the end of this path? What does liberation feel like?
Yeah, what does it look like?
Well, the book describes it as true liberation, which is called nibbana, and it's not some far-off heavenly realm or like a blissful state of mind.
Okay.
It's not about escaping the world, but about fundamentally transforming our relationship to it.
Okay, so it's not about adding something to our experience,
Right.
but about taking something away.
Exactly. Remember, we're focusing on Chapter 4, specifically pages 155 onward, which emphasizes that the path to the cessation of suffering involves uprooting the cause of suffering itself.
Right, and that causes craving.
Exactly.
But how do we just take away craving?
Right.
It feels so deeply ingrained, so much a part of who we are.
That's where the distinction between conventional reality and absolute reality comes in.
Okay.
The book talks about Paramatha and Papanyaka,
Whoa.
which might sound a bit intimidating,
Yeah.
but they're actually quite simple concepts.
Okay, let's break those down. What are Paramatha and Papanyaka?
Think of it this way. Conventional reality, or Papanyaka, is the world as we normally experience it,
Okay.
a realm of separate objects, people, and events.
Right.
It's the world of names and labels, the world of our senses and perceptions.
So it's how we see things at first glance without deeper reflection.
Yes, but the book points out that this conventional view,
Right.
while useful for navigating daily life, is ultimately an illusion.
Okay.
It's like seeing a mirage in the desert.
Yeah.
It appears real.
Right.
But when you get closer, it disappears.
It does vanish, yeah.
And Paramatha, the absolute reality, is what lies beyond that mirage.
Okay, so Paramatha is what's beyond the mirage.
Exactly. Paramatha refers to the true nature of existence,
Yeah.
beyond the veil of appearances.
Right.
It's where we see that all phenomena, including ourselves, are impermanent, interconnected, and empty of any fixed independent self.
So it's like peeling back the layers of perception to see the underlying reality. But how do we actually do that? How do we access this absolute reality?
That's where the practice of insight meditation comes in,
Right.
which the book emphasizes throughout this section. Intellectual understanding alone isn't enough to break free from suffering.
Right.
We need to directly experience these truths. Impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, selflessness,
Yeah.
through mindful observation.
So it's about going beyond the conceptual level and actually feeling these truths in our own experience.
Precisely, through careful observation of our physical sensations.
Yeah.
Feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and even consciousness itself,
Right.
we begin to see that they're constantly arising and passing away.
Okay.
We start to understand that these things are not me or mine.
Right.
They're simply processes happening within awareness.
And as that understanding deepens, our clinging to the 5 aggregates starts to loosen, leading to a lessening of suffering.
Exactly. The book uses the analogy of a fire being extinguished
Okay.
when the fuel of craving is removed.
Yeah.
The flames of suffering naturally die out.
Right.
What remains is the inherent peace and clarity of nibbana.
That's a powerful image. So Nibbana isn't about adding something to our experience.
Right.
It's about letting go of what's been fueling the fire of suffering all along.
Yes, and the book goes even deeper, exploring the different types of nibbana one might experience as they progress along the path.
Wait, so there are different types of Nibbana?
In a way, yes. The book describes the nibbana experienced by stream enterers,
Okay.
once returners, and non-returners, each marking a stage of increasing liberation from the cycle of rebirth.
So they've tasted freedom,
Right.
but they're not fully liberated yet.
Exactly. The book explains that the most complete and absolute form of nibbana is that which is attained by the arahant.
Okay, who is the Arahant?
An arahant is a fully awakened being who has completely extinguished all defilements,
Wow.
including craving, aversion, and ignorance.
Okay.
They have attained complete liberation from the cycle of birth and death,
Right.
and experienced nibbana in its fullness.
Wow, that sounds like the ultimate achievement.
It is, and the book emphasizes that it's a possibility for anyone who wholeheartedly commits to the path laid out in these pages.
This has been so insightful. So to recap, the path to ending suffering, as described in Chapter 4 of Four Noble Truths, isn't about running away from the world, but about deeply understanding its true nature.
Yes.
It involves cultivating right view,
Right.
practicing insight meditation, and embodying the principles of the Eightfold Path.
Yes, and the book makes it clear that this path is accessible to anyone who is willing to put in the effort. It's not about becoming a monk or living in a cave.
Right.
It's about applying these principles in our everyday lives, gradually transforming our relationship to ourselves and the world around us.
And the beauty of it is that each step we take along this path brings us closer to liberation,
Right.
closer to that inherent peace and freedom that is nibbana.
Exactly. It's a journey worth embarking on, and this book offers a profound map to guide us along the way.
Well, this has been another incredible deep dive. I encourage all of you listening to check out this book and continue to explore the depths of these teachings. Who knows what other gems of wisdom you might uncover on your own journey?